Well, good morning and welcome back to another week on the allotment. This week, you won't be surprised to hear me say, has been dominated by the weather. I mean, I'm sure it's wonderful for some people, and it doesn't stop me working, although it does make the work a little more challenging. But on the plot, it's all about whether you can get water to the crops. And despite my best efforts, one of my casualties are the peas. They've just dried up on the plant. They don't like the heat as much as we've got, but you know, we've taken some fair pickings, so I'm not going to worry too much. Just trying to keep everything else. So yeah, welcome along. Not sure what I'm going to be doing, but that's a good start, and I'll see where it takes me. Welcome along. Well, I thought the first thing I'd do is, rather than a plot tour, just point out a few highlights around the plot. So this is the first one, and the most important, I think. I'm loving this new rest area. I've given the tabletop a coat of green paint just to blend it in with the sheds. And I found a new piece of trellis at the garden centre in the free wood pile. So that's enhanced the area a little. So yeah, I'm really pleased with how it all looks, and I love sitting here. The umbrella goes up in a minute, and it's my favourite place to sit with a slight breeze looking at the plot. And this dahlia just here on the right, that came from the front garden a couple of years ago, and it's the only survivor from everything that was there with the pond. But yeah, really enjoying sitting there, enjoying my plot. I do try and sit here occasionally and just do nothing, but you know what it's like when you're in your garden or on your allotment. You sit and you see things and you think, that needs doing, and off I go. But yeah, it's a lovely place to sit and rest. An undoubted highlight so far, he says, touching wood, blight free, are the outdoor tomatoes, and you can see that they're just starting to turn colour. I'm very pleased. There's a lot of tomatoes there. The ones on the left are Crimson Crush, and then there are a few in the middle that Terry gave me, Pomodoro, I think, Pomodoro something, and then at the very end is the one I found called Oh Happy Days. And yeah, really pleased with how they're coming. The slight downside of it all is, with all these tomatoes, we've got no freezer space, so not quite sure what we're going to do with them all, but yeah, we'll see. I've said to you before, if you're a regular viewer, that I like to grow something on the arch that is just for fun and interest. Well, this gourd birdhouse is spot on the money. It really is fascinating. I'm truly amazed at how fast it grows. Well, it's up the framework, and a few of them are now out through the top, so there's a bit more training and coaxing required. But yeah, absolutely loving it. Not quite sure how to prune it and train it, but it's running along the ground there now, which is a slight problem, and then next to it are some cucumbers. But yeah, it absolutely fascinates me. Lots of flowers on it now. I think, from what I can see of them in America, they are pollinated by moths at night. So the flowers come out at night, which I find quite fascinating. Whether we've got the right moths over here, I don't know. Oh, ignorance is bliss. This unnamed white runner bean that Melvin gave me, we picked our first crop off it yesterday, and I took them to Charlotte and Carl's. And so yeah, it's cropping. Very pleased with it. The others are a little way off yet, the St George, but this one is good to go. And there's something I've learned this year, that if you sow your onions from seed, these are sown in the spring and planted out in late spring, and they've grown on, and not a single one has bolted. So I still think I will grow onions from sets in the autumn, but I think I will do this again. They're in really good condition, they're nice and clean, really pleased with them. Well, I'm sat in my favourite place to sit early morning because there's no sun round here. So as the plot heats up in the glare of the daytime sun, I thought I'd read you a little bit more about the body and particularly about childbirth. And it absolutely fascinates me. I knew some of this stuff, but a lot of the detail blew my mind. I'm in awe of it. See what you think. I'm going to do it in 2 stints. A page at a time, and yeah, see what you think. What I do know from the research I've done on health and how to live your life as healthy as possible is that one principle that I believe you should stick by is avoid man and his technology at all costs with regard health. You know, sometimes it's unavoidable, but you know, if it's an option, stick with nature, because nature is far more exquisite and intelligent than we are. We think we're so clever, but actually, you know, medical arrogance has been around for centuries. Anyway, the moment of birth, the starting of a new life, really is quite a miracle. In the womb, a fetus's lungs are filled with amniotic fluid, but with exquisite timing at the moment of birth, the fluid drains away, the lungs inflate, and blood from the tiny heart is sent on its first circuit around the body. What had until a moment ago been a parasite is now on its way to becoming a fully independent, self-maintaining entity. Seems a bit harsh. We don't know what triggers birth. Something must count down the 280 days of human gestation. But no one has worked out where and what that mechanism is, or what makes the alarm go off. All that is known is that a mother's body begins to produce hormones called prostaglandins, which normally are involved in dealing with injuries to tissue, but now activate the uterus, which begins a series of increasingly painful contractions to move the baby into position for birth. This first stage will go on for about 12 hours on average during a woman's first birth, but often becomes faster for subsequent births. The problem with human childbirth is cephalopelvic disproportion. I had to practice that. In simple terms, a baby's head is too big for smooth passage through the birth canal, as any mother will freely attest. The average woman's birth canal is about an inch narrower than the width of the average newborn's head, making it the most painful inch in nature. To squeeze through this constricted space, the baby must execute an almost absurdly challenging 90-degree turn as it proceeds through the pelvis. If ever there was an event that challenges the conception of intelligent design, it is the act of childbirth. No woman, however devout, has ever in childbirth said, "Thank you, Lord, for thinking through this for me." The one piece of assistance that nature gives is that the baby's head is a bit compressible, since the skull bones have not yet fused into a single plate. The reason for these contortions is that the pelvis had to undergo a number of design adjustments to make upright walking feasible, and that made human birth a much more trying and protracted business. Some species of primates can give birth in a couple of minutes. Human females can only dream of such ease. We have made surprisingly little progress in making the process more bearable. As the journal Nature noted in 2016, women in labour have pretty much the same pain relief options as their great-grandmothers, namely gas and air, an injection of pethidine, an opioid, or an epidural anaesthetic. According to several studies, women are not terribly good at remembering the severity of the pain of childbirth. Almost certainly this is a kind of mental defence mechanism to prepare them for future births. You leave the womb sterile, but are liberally swabbed with your mother's personal complements of microbes as you move through the birth canal. We are only just beginning to understand the importance and nature of a woman's birth canal microbiome. Babies born by caesarean section are robbed of this initial wash. Consequences for the baby of not being born naturally can be profound. Studies have shown that people born by C-section have subsequently increased risk for type 1 diabetes, asthma, celiac disease, and even obesity, and an 8-fold greater risk of developing allergies. Caesarean babies eventually acquire the same mix of microbes as those born naturally. By a year, their microbiota are usually indistinguishable, but there is something about those initial exposures that make a long-term difference. No one has figured out quite why that should be. Yeah, fascinating. So if you can, have your baby naturally. It is better for the baby. I shall read a little more later on. This blackberry down at the compost heaps, I don't remember where I got it from or when I planted it. I've no recollection of it. But it's been cropping now for about a week. Just, light pickings, but it really is cropping now, so I have to do a fair bit of picking today. And I think I'm going to take that josterberry out. We don't use them. We've got more than enough fruit on this plot. And if you don't use something, there's no point in growing it, because it does block the path. If I can bring you round here. See, I can't get through that path there. And that's the main path onto the plot. So I think the josterberry's got to go. I won't do it till the winter. But very pleased with this blackberry. And if I'm honest, I am very disappointed that the peas turned and dried so quickly. But you can't help the weather. It's been extremely hot for a really prolonged period, and clearly the peas just didn't like it. So yeah, down to experience. It has been an unusual year, but the peas are one of the things that have suffered. And I think I showed you last time, but this is my modest crop of garlic. I've taken a couple at home, Cheryl wanted to use some, but they'll be getting cleaned up and prepared today to take home and store at home. Well, this is a fig that Melvin very kindly gave me this week. He took some cuttings of a fig he's got in the back garden, and some of them have taken, and I'm the very grateful recipient of one of them. And I've potted it into a bigger pot, and it couldn't look better. And the geranium sat next to it is a cutting I took from one of the geraniums at home, and that looks healthy. Some little flowers developing on it, so very pleased. Talking of which, I have mentioned them before, but these sunflowers called teddy bear, I saw them on Barry's plot, I think, a couple of years ago, and I thought, oh, I'd love to grow them. And I've got them in these 6 tubs, and they are beautiful. I'm thrilled with them. Well, the asparagus bed looks good. It's had a water this morning. Yeah, really pleased. Never grown asparagus before, and you'll remember that I had 5 plants that I grew from seed, and then Bridget has given me some that she's had in those little plug plant containers for 3 years. They look dried up and crusty, but I've put them in the ground and they look good. And with these marigolds along the edge, it's quite a decorative little thing. Maybe next year I'll get a picking. Now there's a healthy looking courgette plant. As you'll be aware, once you start growing courgettes they don't stop coming. And I have a pair of them here, and they couldn't look better. And these bottle systems I've got for watering them work an absolute treat. Well, here's another decision I've made. This raspberry bed, which I weed every week, and still they come up. They're a mess. They're not attractive. The crop has been poor. I've been trying to grow raspberries on these 2 allotments I've got since I got here 6 years ago, and I've never succeeded, with the very notable exception of the one behind the sheds, which is superb. So I'm going to cut my losses, and this is coming out at some point. Not sure I'll manage it today, but this bed is going. I'll grow something else, and I'll just stick with the raspberries that I've got growing beautifully behind the sheds. And talking of decisions being made, I've decided I'm going to reinstate the pond, and what I shall do is I shall keep the path here. I'm going to move the gooseberries over to one of the empty beds over there, and the gooseberries here are coming out, and this is where the pond will go. So the pond will be in here, and what I shall do is that path there I'll move up to edge the pond here. So from there down I'll make this bed here larger to come up to the path there across, and from here there'll be a pond in this bit here. I hope that makes sense, but that's what I'm going to do. When? Not sure. But I do tend to say, oh, I'll do that in a few months, and then a couple of days later it's done. So we shall see. But it's not a good time to be moving plants right now because of this intense heat. So we'll see. Going back to the subject of raspberries, it is peculiar. This bed has been added to and improved. I've had my own allotment compost added. It's been well looked after. These have been watered, and yet they're ragged, and the raspberries are tiny, almost unpickable. Whereas just 30 yards away, behind the sheds, I have this single plant, and of course it puts up multiple canes, but it all originates from one plant, and it could not be healthier. The fruit are large, succulent, tasty. In fact, that is to die for. Yeah, I don't understand it. Anyway, what I've decided, been a week of decisions. This is where all our raspberries come from, and you can see, as raspberries do, it's putting out multiple canes that are coming outside. There's a small berm or raised wall there built with mud from the Hanley canal. I wonder if that helps, because it forms a lagoon into which I water. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to dig up these extra plants, and I'm going to stick them in this row, and I'm going to put it there. Also, something else that's slightly different is these plants don't get quite the same amount of sun as the others, and you would think that would be a disadvantage for soft fruit. I don't know, but maybe, especially when it's as hot as it is, Maybe that's just a little bit of protection, I'm not sure. Anyway, I've decided that's what I'm going to do, dig up the others, and just these will survive. Well, I'll read the second part now about childbirth, and I would just say that Cheryl and I have 3 children, and despite a 30-year military career, I was very, very lucky to be present at the birth of all 3 of our children. And I should declare publicly, although she doesn't watch these, that I am in awe and I have nothing but the greatest respect for my wife and other women for going through childbirth. And never, never have I felt more useless or more grateful to be a bloke. Doctors and their hospitals can charge more for caesarean births than for natural ones, and women understandably often like to know exactly when the birth will take place. 1/3 of women in the United States give birth by C-section now, and more than 60% of C-sections are done for convenience rather than for medical necessity. In Brazil, nearly 60% of all births are by C-section. In Britain, it's 23%. In the Netherlands, it is 13%. If it were done for medical reasons, the rate would be between 5 and 10%. Other useful microbes are picked up from the mother's skin. Martin Blazer, a doctor and professor at New York University, suggests that the rush to clean up babies as soon as they are born is actually depriving them of protective microorganisms. On top of all that, about 4 women in every 10 are given antibiotics during delivery, which means the doctors are declaring war on babies' microbes just as they are acquiring them. We've no idea what consequences this has for their long-term health, but it's unlikely to be good. There are concerns already that certain beneficial bacteria are becoming endangered. There's a name of a bacteria here in Latin and I can't pronounce it. An important microbe in mother's milk is found in up to 90% of children in developing countries, but as little as 30% in the developed world. Whether born by C-section or not, by the age of 1, the average baby has accumulated about 100 trillion microbes, or so it has been estimated. But by that time, for reasons unknown, it appears to be too late to reverse the predisposition for acquiring certain diseases. One of the most extraordinary features of early life is that nursing mothers produce over 200 kinds of complex sugars. The formal name is oligosaccharides in their milk that their babies cannot digest because humans lack the necessary enzymes. The oligosaccharides are produced purely for the benefit of the baby's gut microbes, as bribes in effect. As well as nurturing symbiotic bacteria, breast milk is also full of antibodies. There is some evidence that a nursing mother absorbs a little of her suckling baby's saliva through her breast ducts, and that this is analysed by her immune system, which adjusts the amount and types of antibodies she supplies to the baby according to its needs. Isn't life marvellous? That's just unbelievable. In 1962, only 20% of American women breastfed their babies. By 1977, this had increased to 40%. Still clearly a minority. Today, almost 80% of American women breastfeed just after birth, though this number falls to 49% after 6 months and 27% after a year. In Britain, the proportion starts at 81%, but then plunges to 34% after 6 months and just 0.5% after a year. The worst rate in the developed world. In the poorer nations, many women were long encouraged by advertising to believe that infant formula was better for their babies than their own milk. But formula was expensive, so often they watered it down to make it go further. and sometimes the only water available to them was less clean than their own breast milk. The result all too often was an increase in childhood mortality. I'll stop there. But that bit about saliva being absorbed into the breast to go to the immune, that's just, nature is so clever. And in our medical arrogance, you know, women have if you have a C-section for no good reason other than convenience, and then you don't breastfeed, you know, I mean, just how many disadvantages do you want to give a child? I'm sure if mothers were given this information, they would make better decisions. I mean, obviously, if you need a C-section for medical reason, it's a done deal. Can't be helped. It's all about information, isn't it? I just find all of that fascinating, and I'm incredulous at the complexity and wonder of nature. Anyway, I hope you found that interesting. Back to the allotment. Actually, while I'm here, I should just say the parsnips are coming on beautifully. Really pleased with them. Well, let's just hope the parsnips in the soil are as good as the top growth. There's another job, just got these out the back of the van. There's some leeks, and then some on the right, the Swedes. I had a packet free, I think, with one of the magazines with some Swedes that are meant to be club root resistant. So I thought, oh, let's give them a go. So where I've taken out the cauliflowers and the broccoli, I'm going to put them in. Another job. I better get started. Actually, before I do some work, there's another highlight of the plot this year, is this little trough in front of the tool shed. These are a dwarf mixed cosmos with one rogue marigold in the middle, and I think they're absolutely beautiful. Set the shed off a treat. The allotment for me is all about fruit and veg, but it doesn't mean you can't have a little bit of beauty. Well, I'm sure I haven't got it spot on this year, but I'm working at it in so much as having successional crops. So as I empty a bed, I have something to go in its stead. And here's a case in point. So these are 4 cauliflowers that were sown in the spring, a few weeks after the main crop. And this bed was all cauliflower and calabrese. So they're harvested and in the fridges or the freezers or on our dinner plate now. And in place are 4 cauliflowers, and then a tray of Swede Marianne, which is allegedly club root resistant. So I've limed the planting holes, I've put the plants in, and I'm going to water them and then put the net back on as the cabbage whites arrive. And we shall see. They are still a little bit small. Normally I wouldn't put them in that small, so we'll see what the slugs do. Anyway, I'm pleased to have something to go in the ground so the ground's not empty. Well, there's another job ticked off the list. That's the last of my leeks in the ground. So there's a bed of them there, very well spaced out. And the last of them popped in there. So that's it. The leeks are on their own, and I'm hoping for a winter harvest, because we do like our leeks. That's amazing. It's fully sized and it's now turning orange, and it's mid-July. I don't think it's read the Halloween script. What a strange year. well, it's more Heath Robinson, my speciality, but that's just encased the picnic table a little more, and those are the raspberry runners from the successful raspberry, which is through there. So I don't hold out much hope because the ground is so hard. I wasn't able to dig out too many roots, but there are some fibrous roots on it, so we'll see. I've given it a really good dousing with some water, put in some well rotted compost, and we'll see. They've got one chance, and they are in a bit of shade there at the moment, so that might help. We'll see. Oh, that's warm. It's gone up a couple of degrees in the last hour. Well, that's our garlic harvest for the year. There's 4 on the end on the right that wouldn't make storage. They're a little bit deformed, so I shall tell Cheryl that they're the ones to be used first, but otherwise the rest will be stored at home as and when we need them. Lovely. Solent white. Well, the onions were bolted, so we're having those with our tea tonight, whatever that might be. The beetroot will go through the juicer in the morning, and the fruit we're continuing to eat fresh on our breakfast cereal and as evening meals. Blooming lovely. We've been picking strawberries for over a month now. That's unbelievable. It's fantastic, and I'm really pleased with that harvest of garlic. Yeah, very happy. Well, Cheryl just left. She came up for lunch, did a bit of picking, which is always appreciated. And I've had a good, productive, long day. I got up here in the dark. Cool, smell those sweet peas. And I've done everything I intended to. Produced a bit more firewood to take home for the wood burning stove. But yeah, got the Swedes in, got the leeks in. A lot of hoeing and weeding and watering, about 3 hours worth of watering, and then putting this tiny little bit of fence up. Got the thumbs up from Cheryl, unusually, and I've moved some of those raspberry canes. Not an ideal day to do it, I know, but we'll see. I've watered them well. So thanks for joining me. I hope you found the stuff about childbirth interesting. You know, some of those facts, how they're not more widely known, is utterly beyond me. To make decisions in life on whether to breastfeed or not, you really must have the full information about the consequences of doing it and not doing it. And as a society, we're not good at it. Anyway, thank you for joining me. I shall be back next week, I think. Until then, take care, look after yourselves, enjoy the heat and the sun, and I'll see you next week. Take care, bye for now.